Hi. Namaste. Welcome to the beginning of another Yamsug's ASMR video. Today we will be going through chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita. You may also notice that my hair is up. I think it's the first time I've ever worn it up in a video, so that may be new to you. Nonetheless, we will be beginning chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, all about the yoga of knowledge. Very exciting. Here I have an incense stick for us to light to set the atmosphere. Let me grab my lighter. Perhaps you can hear it crackle. You are welcome here. You are allowed to be here, in this space, across time. I know that life can be confusing at times, but to listen to the Bhagavad Gita just makes sense. So I hope you relish this chapter with me as we explore ancient wisdom together. Here I will put this incense stick in this incense box, if I can line up the hole. Maybe this side would be easier. So, let us continue. Chapter 4, Jnana Yoga, the Yoga of Knowledge. After teaching the science of Karma Yoga, achieving oneness with the Supreme through right action, in the previous chapter, Lord Krishna outlines the process of achieving the same goal via Jnana Yoga, the yoga of knowledge. In this chapter, action without knowledge proves to be counterproductive. Hence, to progress spiritually, right knowledge is critical. Knowledge, jnana, can give action, karma, a whole new meaning, and so the presence of knowledge is essential for action to be effective. None can be without the other, or they falter. Lord Krishna says to Arjuna, I taught this imperishable yoga, the science of getting one with God, to Vyasa, the sun god. Vyasa taught it to Manu, the father of humankind, and Manu passed it on to Ikshvaku, the founder of the solar dynasty in which the Lord appeared again as Rama. This knowledge was thus handed down through orderly succession and was received by the royal sages in that way. But by long lapse of time here, the great science of yoga was lost, O Parantapa. Verily, that same ancient science of yoga is today told to you by me, as you are my devotee, as well as my friend. This knowledge is a supreme secret. I think a wholesome point here is that Krishna refers to Arjuna not just as his devotee, but as a friend. Every form of God has its own benefits. The benefit of Krishna is that he's A-okay with you approaching him, just like you would any other friend. Some commentary. Krishna lays out the history of spiritual knowledge in these lines, leaving no room for speculation or doubt. It all makes sense, especially when we consider all the other information found in the Bhagavad Gita and the other Vedic texts. When all of this information is considered together, it becomes clear how the eternal divine knowledge has been transmitted down through the ages. Although the Bhagavad Gita was sung by Lord Krishna 5,000 years ago, the knowledge contained in it was disseminated by him as soon as he created the universe. That is why it is the purest and among the most original form of knowledge. Not only does the Lord explain the significance of this knowledge here, but he also mentions how this complicated knowledge can be understood in its true essence. One needs to be a devotee and a friend of Krishna to understand this intricate and confidential science of yoga if one wants to become his associate and live in his divine abode for eternity. Arjuna to Lord Krishna asks, "Your birth was later. Vivasvan, the sun god, was born earlier. How am I to understand this, that you instructed thus to Vivasvan in the beginning of creation?" It's a good question. Here before Arjuna is his charioteer, a family member, a cousin. Yet we are expected to believe that this human being taught knowledge to the sun god. The sun has certainly existed long before Krishna took birth as a cousin to Arjuna. So how does this make sense? Arjuna's question to the Lord is essentially a layman's query. Krishna is no ordinary human, as Arjuna is well aware. However, he is unable to think clearly because of his bewilderment, and consequently is asking the Lord such questions. Of course, the kind Lord purposefully created such a situation in order to rekindle this divine knowledge for the benefit of future generations of mankind. Arjuna's incomprehension has caused him to regard Krishna as an ordinary being. Classic. Lord Krishna replies, "O Arjuna, many births of mine have passed, and also yours. I know them all, but you not, O Parantapa. Although I am unborn, am of imperishable nature, and am the Lord of all beings. Yet, subjugating my own divine nature, I incarnate by my own nature, in Krishna's own way, not like a human takes birth normally. Whenever there is a decline in religion, virtue, and a predominant rise in irreligion, vice, O descendant of Bharata, I manifest myself as an avatar. For the protection of the pious and for the annihilation of the wicked, and thus to re-establish righteousness, I appear in every age. One who truly understands the divine nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take birth again. He comes to me, O Arjuna. Being freed from attachment, fear, and anger, being fully absorbed in me, taking complete shelter in me, and sanctified by the penance of gaining knowledge, many have attained my nature by becoming one with Krishna. In whatever way men approach me, I reward them accordingly. All humans in this way follow my path, O Partha. Desiring the fruits of their actions here, they, the human beings, worship the demigods by making sacrifices. For material success is achieved quickly through result-oriented work in this mortal world. The fourfold caste system has been created by me according to the different modes of nature and the related actions. But although I am its creator, you should know me as a non-doer and immutable, as Krishna himself is not a part of that system. Action does not taint me, nor have I desire for the rewards of actions. One who knows me thus does not become entangled by actions. Work was performed even by the ancient seekers of liberation in this knowledge. Therefore, you should perform your dutiful actions, as did the ancients of olden times. Some commentary. In this way, the Lord presents a brief overview of his divine character. He remembers all the births of all living beings, which is only possible for the Supreme God. He is unborn, being outside of the confines of time and space that bind us. Being the eternal person, he never dies. He arrives at opportune times in the material world, in varied forms. Only those who, by the practice of yoga, establish themselves into perfect knowledge of the soul and the Supreme Soul, the all-knowing God, and thus become his pure devotees, can cross this material ocean and reach the Supreme. The Lord thereafter clarifies that even though he is the supreme doer, his actions have no effect on his nature, unlike in the case of material beings, and so he effectively remains a non-doer. So, one should understand the Lord in this way, and be engaged in one's duties in such knowledge. It's a subtle point here, that although the source of this universe is ultimately responsible for everything that happens in it, nothing that happens in it defines the source. There are many layers of spiritual wisdom here. One of them comes later when Krishna introduces himself to be the Self. So, in that context, as the Self, as what you are in essence, know that even though you are responsible for all the actions that take place within your life, nothing in your life defines who you are. The Self is always unaffected by the actions performed by the Self. Krishna continues, what is action? What is inaction? Even the wise are confused regarding this. I will explain to you the true meaning of action, knowing which you shall be liberated from evil, the spiral of births and deaths in the material world. For verily, action has to be understood, and forbidden action has to be understood, and inaction has to be understood. The true nature of action is imponderable. One who recognizes inaction in action and action in inaction is wise among humanity, for they are transcendental, though engaged in performing actions. Alright, now that is a dense verse. It said that when sage Vyasa, the compiler of the scriptures, was narrating this story to Ganesha, the elephant god, they made a deal. Vyasa said, I would like for you to pen down this story. And Ganesha said, okay, on one condition, that you don't stop speaking. For the moment that you stop speaking, I will finish writing. And Sage Vyasa had a counter offer. He said, okay, I will accept that term if you accept this term, that you can only move on to writing the next verse once you understand the truth of the verses that you have wrote so far. And Ganesha agreed. So, any time that Vyasa wanted to stop speaking for a while, he would throw in a particularly dense verse like this one. Then, while Ganesha thought about it, he would, go to the bathroom, have a bite to eat. So this verse, one who recognizes inaction in action and action in inaction is wise among humanity. So, what is inaction in action? It means that we perform our duties with diligence and faith, but ultimately offer the outcome to God. So, for example, let's say you save a bunch of people and they thank you for it. Even though by your action they are saved, you say and you believe that it was not me who was working. God has saved you. I merely was the vehicle for his action. So, although we are acting, we are also not. On the other side of things, there is action in inaction. What does that mean? Well, when we refrain from action, sometimes that says a lot more than doing something. Like when we meditate, it's literally speaking the absence of action, and yet it still requires effort. So there is a kind of activity of the soul that takes place when we deny the mind and abide in that non-doership. Let's continue. Whose endeavors are devoid of desires and purposes, Karma Yoga, and whose actions are burned in the fire of knowledge, Jnana Yoga, they, the sages, call wise. Abandoning all attachment to the fruits of work, ever content and independent of material wants, though engaged in activities, they verily perform no binding action. expectations of return, with their mind and intellect under control, having abandoned all sense of ownership, such a person incurs no sin. Content with what comes to them of its own accord, having transcended the dualities of gain, loss, rich and poor, etc., being free from envy and being steady in both success and failure. They, though performing actions, is not bound by their reactions. In other words, we're describing the state beyond karma, how to be free from karma. Of a person who is free from attachment, of the liberated person whose mind is situated in knowledge and who acts as sacrifice by devoting the work and its results to Krishna. All actions dissolve fully, thereby not creating any effects on their future lives. Some commentary. No discussion on true knowledge can be considered complete without a discussion on what constitutes desired action. Both of these, along with the other elements of yoga, are needed for one to attain the purpose of one's life by reaching the all-attractive Krishna. Hence, the Lord again provides a brief explanation of Karma Yoga, as was discussed in the previous chapter. He further says, the offering is Brahman. Before I finish the rest of this verse, which contains Brahman something like 5 times, know that Brahman, in case you don't know, is a very mystical Sanskrit word. It comes from this concept of Pura, which is like an all-pervasive expansion. And so the Brahman represents that which is omnipresent. It's a very highly sacred word for the ultimate reality and the supreme Godhead. It is a very big word. Krishna says, the offering is Brahman. The clarified butter, the ghee poured in the sacrificial fire, is Brahman. The sacrificial fire itself is Brahman. The oblation, that which is sacrificed in the fire, is Brahman. Brahman is verily reached by those, all of whose activities are concentrated on the attainment of Brahman. There's a lot of duality throughout the Bhagavad Gita, especially in the process of Bhakti Yoga through devotion. But this is a very non-dual verse describing the offering, the ghee, the sacrificial fire, the sacrificed, all as Brahman. Everything in the spiritual journey is non-different from the Supreme, which is a very mystical way of saying that it's not about the destination. Don't think of Brahman, that ultimate goal, as existing in the future. It is the very process itself. Some other yogis offer sacrifices to the demigods alone. Some others offer sacrifice itself as a sacrifice in the fire of Brahman. Some offer hearing and the other senses as sacrifice in the fires of restraint, thus vowing to engage the senses only in pure spiritual endeavors. Others sacrifice sound and the other objects of the senses in the fires of the senses, vowing never to indulge in them. Others offer the activities of all the senses, or the activities of the life breath, into the fire of the yoga of self-control, kindled by knowledge. Again, others offer sacrifices of wealth, sacrifice through the practice of penances, sacrifice through the practice of yoga, or sacrifice through study and acquisition of knowledge, and ascetics accept strict vows as sacrifice. Others offer as sacrifice the movement of the outgoing breath into the incoming, and others the incoming breath into the outgoing, controlling the flow of the outgoing and incoming breaths by the practice of Pranayama, controlled breathing. Fun fact here, I once asked an AI the meaning of this verse 29 from chapter 4. What does it mean to offer the ingoing breath into the outgoing and the outgoing breath into the ingoing? I was very amazed by the response. GPT-3 said that the ingoing breath represents new experiences, and the outgoing breath represents letting go of old experiences. So offering the incoming into the outgoing means that we do new things. We accept new experiences as a means of letting go of the old. And we let go of the old as a means to accept new experiences. Isn't that beautiful? I'm sure there's many other ways to interpret it though, and others are just as valid, if not more. On to sacrifice again. Others, regulating their diet, offer pure outgoing breath into the air as a sacrifice. All these are knowers of sacrifice, whose sins are destroyed by their sacrificial activities. Only the eaters of that nectar-like remnants of sacrifices go to the eternal Brahman. Even this world is not for the non-performer of sacrifices. What to say of the other divine world, O best of the gurus? Thus, various kinds of sacrifices are spread through the mouth of Brahmins, as mentioned in the Vedas. Know them all to be born of action. Thus, knowing, you shall become liberated. O Parantapa, the sacrifice of knowledge, the practice of acquisition of divine knowledge, is superior to the mere sacrifice of material objects. All acts of sacrifice in their entirety culminate in knowledge. In knowledge, O Partha. So, we use the word sacrifice many dozen times in the last few verses. Does this mean that we should be throwing everything of our belongings out and doing everything without awareness of our needs and wants and live a life only to fulfill something outside of ourselves? If that's the kind of impression you got when you hear the word sacrifice, it's not so dramatic. The reason all these various examples of sacrifice are being outlined, in my opinion, is to show that anything can be a kind of sacrifice. And ultimately, it's not what you sacrifice, it's that you are engaging in some discipline, that you know that it would feel good to do this or see that or achieve this, but you just let those those ideas go as an offering to what's possible. Some commentary. The Lord thus describes the meaning and significance of sacrifices in one's spiritual pursuits. The sacrifices that Krishna is talking about here are not some religious obligations to be carried out half-heartedly to please the gods and have them fulfill one's material wants. These are sacrifices made with complete awareness of the true identity of the self as a soul, one with the Supreme, with the sole purpose of purifying one's mind and thus making oneself fit for liberation from this world. Sacrifices are of several types. The Lord gives a few examples for our understanding. One can, for example, forego mundane entertainment in favor of studying holy scriptures. One can meditate on the Lord with an absolutely purified mind, free of lustful thoughts. One can relinquish eating impure food that cannot be offered to the Lord. Or one can take a vow to live an ascetic life, free of sexual desires. Whatever the sacrifice, it must be offered to the Supreme Brahman, which is Lord Krishna, with knowledge of his actual nature and awareness of his presence in all components of nature. Of course, the more kinds of sacrifices one may practice, the better it will be for his spiritual practice, or hers. Personally, I've given up vaping nicotine within the last 6 months or so. Not because I didn't feel good, but because it felt good to just offer it as a sacrifice. I also stopped eating meat, again, not out of some moral obligation, but as a spiritual sacrifice. There are many things in my life I now do and don't do out of the spirit of sacrifice because it's a practice of free will. And the more we do it, the more self-control we get. And the more self-control we get, the more happiness becomes our destiny. When we don't have much self-control, then we are truly binded to this world by the ups and downs of life. Whatever happens, we struggle with patience, with self-control. Sacrifice teaches us to be patient, to be disciplined. It's not needed to live, but it's a beautiful opportunity to live under your own terms instead of being dictated by circumstances that are out of our control internally. The Blessed Lord further explains, know that through surrender, through inquiry, and through service, the wise sages who have seen the truth will impart that knowledge to you. Knowing which, O Bandhava, you will never again come under such delusion, and by which you will see all beings in yourself, being of the same nature as oneself, and also in me, as part of the Supreme. Even if you are the biggest sinner among all sinners, by the boat of knowledge, you will certainly be able to cross all oceans of sin. Beautiful. As a blazing fire reduces firewood to ashes, O Arjuna, similarly, the fire of knowledge reduces all reactions of material actions to ashes. Verily, there is nothing so purifying here in this material world as knowledge. One who has become perfected in yoga finds it within themselves in due course of time. A person full of faith, who is dedicated to the attainment of that transcendental knowledge, and has subdued the senses, attains it. And having attained the knowledge, they, without delay, attain the supreme peace of self-realization. However, one who is ignorant and faithless, and has a doubting mind, that is, has baseless doubts about the truth and the teachings given in the scriptures or imparted by realized souls, perishes in their spiritual endeavors. For a person of doubting mind, there is neither this world, the material realm, nor the next, the spiritual realm, nor bliss that emanates from Godhead. A lovely point here, that if we are constantly doubting, then of course we're not going to find that happiness that we're looking for. This isn't to say that you should throw your intellect and reasoning out the window and have blind faith. Of course, cautiousness and carefulness is always allowed. Don't jump quickly into anything which you don't know the depths of. However, we should have some room for openness. Even a little goes a long way. Actions do not bind one who has renounced the rewards of work by the practice of yoga, getting one with the Supreme, whose doubts have been annihilated by knowledge, and who is poised in the knowledge of the self, O Dhananjaya. Therefore, with the sword of knowledge, cut asunder this doubt about the self, about being a soul, born in your heart out of ignorance. Take refuge in yoga of knowledge. Arise, O descendant of Bharata. Lord Krishna thus explains the importance of the knowledge revealed by him in the Bhagavad Gita and expanded upon in other Vedic scriptures. One should ideally seek out this knowledge from a realized sage, and once one has fully grasped this knowledge, there is nothing that can prevent him from experiencing Krishna's divine kingdom. This knowledge frees one from the shackles of the effects of one's karma, which may bind them to their material world and lead to another miserable life here. Thus, one should never doubt the authority of the divine scriptures and the authoritative knowledge given therein. In the previous chapter, Krishna talked about Karma Yoga, right action. In this chapter, he takes us one step closer to liberation by explaining Jnana Yoga, right knowledge. In this way, the Lord inspires Arjuna, and through him, all of us, to give up all material wants and perform our duties without any expectations. Karma Yoga, in full knowledge of the self, the soul, and Krishna, the Supreme. So we end chapter 4 on the yoga of knowledge, Jnana Yoga. I wish you a beautiful sleep if you are not sleeping already. If you are, then may the rest of your sleep go beautifully, and may your dreams be meaningful, and may you wake up refreshed. I thank you, dear viewer, for listening with me in this journey through the Bhagavad Gita. I am very blessed to have this opportunity to read to you. May you have a beautiful rest of your present moment.